Everybody, Dennis Prager here, and I'm going to go straight to my guest. Whenever I think Latin America, I think of Mary O'Grady of the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal. I read every column she writes, and I've had her on many, many times because of her clarity and knowledge. So I'm going to talk to her now about Venezuela. Mary, thank you for making the time for me. I know you're in great demand right now.
Hi, Dennis. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. I'm honored to be with you.
Wow. Well, I am honored that you are honored. So this could go on. I really am. I'm not joking. I'm honored that you're honored.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so before your understanding of it, please just give the bare facts of what's happening in Venezuela.
Okay, well, last year the dictator, Nicolas Maduro, had an election in which he barred the most competitive candidates from running, and so nobody showed up. It was basically a rigged exercise, and that was in May, but he didn't take office until about a week ago. And before he took office, something called the Lima Group, which is 14 countries in the Western Hemisphere, not including the U.S., said he should not take office because he is illegitimate. He was not elected, and instead he should follow the Constitution, which says that the president, the duly elected president of the National Assembly, should, in the case that, there's no president, take the position as an interim president, and then there should be no elections. So they said that back, I think, in January 4th they said it. Then the dictator said that he was sworn in as president again for another 6-year term on January 10th. And this guy, who's now the president of the National Assembly, said, no, I'm the president because I'm following the Constitution. We don't have an elected president, so I will be the interim president until there's a new election. Now, the problem with this is Venezuela is a military dictatorship. Repeat after me, all you friends of Cuba. This is a military dictatorship, as Cuba is a military dictatorship, something that the left in this country is supposedly opposed to, except when it comes to these crackpots in Latin America. So anyway, you have this military dictatorship, which means that the military is on the side of the dictator. And yesterday, which was the anniversary of the last time they finally kicked out a dictator, that was 1958, all these people poured into the streets, unarmed individuals, and not just in Caracas, although the photos of Caracas are quite impressive, but it's happening in places like the birthplace of Hugo Chavez, which used to be very hardcore Chavez land, and many other cities across the country. And the reason is simple. The country is starving to death. I mean, the living conditions are so squalid. I tell you, you would cry if you saw some of these pictures. Malnourished children, mothers who don't eat in order that the little bit of food they have can go to their children. Nothing like shampoo and soap and all those things we take for granted. No car parts. So there's no transportation, there's joblessness, there's rampant crime. I mean, it is just a mess. And you have 30 million people who are saying, no mas, we cannot take this any longer. And all of this so-called support for Chavismo is gone, and all you have left is a bunch of thugs with guns who basically are in business with the organized crime racket that run drugs from Colombia through Venezuela. And on their backing them are the Russians, the Nicaraguans, the Cubans, the Iranians. Turkey is on the side of these guys. A small group of people. And then you have most of the international community, including pretty much all of Latin America, not Bolivia, not Nicaragua, and by the way, interestingly enough, not Mexico, but most of the rest of Latin America, all the democracies, the European Union, France, Japan, and the United States all saying, you know what, Venezuela needs to hold new elections, and they need to end this because there are 30 million people who are really suffering. And right now it's a standoff, and I can give you a little bit more about what's going on the ground there. It's very hard to know. It is really the fog of war has set in, and there's a lot of bad information being pumped out because there are a lot of bad guys who would like to see someone like me get caught in promoting fake news. So I have to be extremely careful. But on the ground, I would say that there's this 30 million people who are against it, and you still have the military, most of which seems to be not turning on Maduro yet, but at the same time, they didn't fire on the crowd yesterday. So I think what we're going to end up seeing is kind of a low-grade war, maybe hand-to-hand combat in a lot of these rougher neighborhoods where, you know, the National Guard is basically going to be clashing with the real people. And the real people in this case, some of them are people who are very heavily armed. So it could get ugly.
You are distinguishing between the National Guard and the military?
Yeah, I am, because the National Guard is the one that's really benefited a lot from the drug trafficking. I mean, over the years, what has been pretty much ascertained is that the National Guard is the one that runs the drug trafficking business from Colombia through. You remember that when Venezuela badly wanted Honduras, because Honduras was the place where they would take the drugs from Venezuela and land in Honduras, and that's why they wanted Castro's friends in charge there. There's a lot of drug trafficking that goes through Honduras. And that's all run by the National Guard. Now, inside the military, you have, the best information I have, and I would not say that I can be assured of this 100%, but that, you know, Chavez purged the military and he elevated all the loyalists to powerful positions. So it looks like you might have, you know, generals at the very top that are remaining loyal to Maduro. But my information is that among the rank and file, there's a lot of dissension and a lot of breaking ranks. But, you know, how that is going to manifest itself is still not clear to me. I think what I can say with a lot of confidence is that all of these guys in the rank and file, and if you look at them, they come from very, you know, lower income or middle class families. They have mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts,
who are suffering,
who are all starving.
Yes, that's
so
always right.
So they've had it with these guys, and they want Maduro to get out.
So theoretically, I infer from what you're saying, it's theoretically possible that the National Guard and members of the armed forces would clash.
Yeah, and even inside the armed forces, that there would be two different factions. And I just want to add one other thing, which again, I have to be careful with this because part of it is speculation. I'm not on the ground there. I have some pretty good sources, but for sure we know that Cuba, Russia, and Iran have an interest in Venezuela. For Cuba, it's because they want the oil and they want the real estate because it helps them promote their ideological mission. And they provide a lot of the cyber intelligence, and they basically are the intel people. They learn that from the Stasi, and they're very good. They're good at spying on people and so forth. The Russians are suppliers of weapons, and their motivation is basically to make life miserable in the Western Hemisphere and for us. I mean, they've long said, you know what? You want to say something about us going into Ukraine or into the Baltics? Well, you know what? We're going to get on your back about Venezuela. And the Russian deputy foreign minister was already out saying, you know, you better not go into Venezuela because it's going to cause a big mess for you. And I think that's because, you know, the Russians also have their own paramilitary in Venezuela. I'm not sure about that, but this is some of the intel I'm picking up. And the really scary thing, and of course the Iranians have been flying back and forth. You know, Chavez had a very tight relationship with Tehran, and there were direct flights going back and forth. And, you know, I've reported on that a lot. So there's a lot of stuff, not just unique to Venezuela, but this is going to become a geopolitical mess there. And I will just say one more thing. I know I'm probably talking too much, but... No,
you're not. Every word is a gem. Go ahead.
Trump said, now think about this, Trump recognized Juan Guaido, who is the
interim president.
The interim president, yeah. And of course, the interim president is now in charge, according to the U.S. So when Maduro comes out and says that the U.S. has to get out of Venezuela, the only response the U.S. can make is, you're not the boss anymore, so we don't take orders from you. And Guaidó did not tell us to get out of Venezuela. So as of now, the U.S. diplomats are still in the compound there, are still in Venezuela. I don't know if they're in the compound. Mm-hmm. The Marines are still guarding them. And I think that is one way that Russia could suck us into a quagmire.
Mary, I understand you can do only one segment. Is that correct?
I should go, yeah.
Okay, all right. God bless you. Thank you for your time. This is important, and I'll comment for my listeners. You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. You're pointing at something. You're not pointing at something. Oh, I know this thing. Yeah. For those watching, here we go. Look at that. Do I know the technical aspect of this show or what? Man is elected in Venezuela by not being elected, right? Maduro is a dictator, essentially. It's a false election. Constitution says in such a case, you get an interim president. There is now an interim president. Think about the countries that are backing Maduro, who is starving his people. Simple as that. One of the richest countries in Latin America is now a basket case. Thanks to the left, because the left ruins everything it touches. There's a perfect example. You know how many people on the left in America supported Chavez when he first came into power? They're quiet now. Who went down to Caracas to say how much they like it, because if they hear the word equality and if the person is also anti-American, whoa, what a bonanza. So who supports the dictator, the starve his people dictator in Venezuela? Think about it. Russia, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Turkey. Wow, what a bunch, eh? But hey, that's not the issue. People, it's not even, they're not even discussed. Only Russia's discussed because of the hatred of the president. Was Barack Obama harder on Russia than this president? No, this president's harder on Russia than Barack Obama was. The immaturity of the left, aside from its venality, is to assess people by their thoughts, not by their actions. Who's been harder on Russia? That's all. Forget all your talk about collusion and this. Who's been harder on Russia? Barack Obama or Donald Trump? Anyway, that's quite a list of disgusting regimes.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, and a good Tuesday to you. My theory about January's has been validated. I think it's the fastest moving month. It goes. It's good to make good use of time, everybody. Hello, and what do I tell you? They're very angry at Howard Schultz of Starbucks. The Democrats are very angry at him. It's going to be interesting to see when he is increasingly defamed by folks on the left, if he begins to wonder, where does hate come from in this country? The right or the left? Howard Schultz, this is awesome. Heckled seconds into a New York City appearance. This is CNN. All right. You want to play this, please, Sean? Want to play that, please? CNN, Howard Schultz.
I am seriously considering running for president as a centrist independent. And I wanted to clarify the word independent, which I view merely as a designation on the ballot.
Don't help elect Trump, you egotistical billionaire. Don't help elect Trump, you egotistical billionaire.
Where was this? Did he? Where? Where in New York? Where in New York? Do we know? Where? Okay, we'll find out. So we don't know. I want to know exactly because I want to know, did he not plan to speak in front of a friendly audience? Or is there no friendly audience in New York City? Maybe friendly audience New York City is sort of an oxymoron. Yeah, he's a billionaire. That's what is Nancy? Well, Nancy Pelosi's not a billionaire, but she's very rich. You know, since a campaign finance reform was passed by John McCain, who was a hero and a fool, and you can be both, and Feingold, who was just a fool, and of course all the fools who voted for it. You know, it's limited how much people can give to any campaign. So what happened was, we went from having people at the middle class running for office to wildly rich people because they could then fund their own campaigns. The progressive mind is intoxicated with change because it has a bored soul. Every leftist has a bored soul. There are liberals who run the gamut, conservatives run the gamut, but every leftist has a bored soul. It needs to be filled with adrenaline-producing change. Look, what is the classic left-wing question? What did Congress do, right? What laws did you sponsor? You want to run for re-election? Well, what bills did you sponsor? What was Calvin Coolidge's theory? Calvin Coolidge's theory was the less the government did, the better. That was the last president who felt that way. Is it Barnes & Noble in Manhattan? Why would he think that at Barnes & Noble in Manhattan he'd get a friendly audience? Now, he should have made the announcement in Seattle. Might have been very similar, I agree, but at least he's from Seattle, or that's where he built Starbucks. So why do billionaires run? Because they could fund their own campaign thanks to campaign finance laws. This is one of those examples of the law of unintended consequences. It's just it's a problem. Those of us who have happy lives, who are filled with gratitude for living in the United States of America, we have to share the country with the angry progressive. All progressives are angry. Okay, not all liberals, not all conservatives. Some conservatives are, some liberals are, but all progressives are angry. I mean, who of them radiate joy of life? Just name a leftist who radiates joy of life. Kamala Harris? Who of them? They're angry. If they weren't angry, they wouldn't be progressive. They're angry at how bad America has turned out under capitalism and under Judeo-Christian values. They're just angry. There's something terrible going on. That's why I've made such a big deal of the cheerleaders. You see, I know what happens. It's the sort of thing. First they came for the Boy Scouts. And, I'm not a Boy Scout. Let them ruin the Boy Scouts. Then they came for the cheerleaders. What do I give a damn about cheerleaders? Okay. Then, you see, that's what happens. Institution after institution, traditional, important, not important, but they're just mowed down in the institution-destroying way that the left operates. How many churches close in the United States in a year? Thousands of churches close every year. Another victory for the left. Oh, God, I'm reading this. I'm reading it because I read things I don't agree with. And the guy is he's serious, and he's not a leftist, he's a liberal, but he's a very deep atheist, Steven Pinker of Harvard. I've had him on. I'm going to have him on again when I finish the book. And it's so fascinating. We're supposed to fill our lives. There's no God. There's no transcendent. We just fill our lives with humanism. Is he serious? Is he serious? Nothing ultimately means anything. Every emotion you have is some chemically transmitted neurological communication in the brain. Everything. But hey, that's why people are being made into compost. I made a point yesterday, which was pointed out to me was of some importance. Because when I make the point, I sometimes know that a point is important, but I just leave it there. Why, if we are really just part of the ecological system, why not leave your dead body to animals to eat? If we're going to make compost into a tree, become compost and make a tree, why aren't we going to feed animals? What could be more beautiful than that? One 8 Prager 776. What is this now from Kamala Harris? Racism is real in America. Whoa, this is it there. How could you be not angry? If you think America's saturated with sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and transphobia, and racism, how could you not be angry? God, are they frauds? I don't care that they are. They're ruining my country. Do you understand? The greatest experiment in human history is being ruined by these people. It would be as if you had a beautiful parent, a wonderful mother, or a wonderful father, and one of the siblings, one of the children, went around speaking only about how terrible the parent was, when you know that, of course, the parent is flawed, but is so good. Mom is really kind and meant well, and she doesn't have a bone of hate in her. But one of the children goes around saying how mom is disgusting. Mom is all of these bigot and all of these other things. That's how I feel to the people I'm stuck with as fellow citizens, leftists. Guy goes to Texas Tech to give a speech on the case for colonialism. Which, you know. By the way, there is a moral case for colonialism, and we have such a video up. I want to thank those of you who have written to me that you've canceled your Spotify subscription. They have cut out all Prager University ads. Gave us zero reason. Zero. We know the reason. They're leftists. Think of me and celebrate. It's out one day. We have over 1 million views. So I have not officially announced that Spotify, the music server, has banned ads. Do you understand how mainstream, from a Prager University, do you have any idea how mainstream Prager University is? 4 prime ministers, 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, professors, Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Berkeley, MIT. It's Charles Krauthammer, the late Charles Krauthammer, George Will, Jonah Goldberg. I mean, these are anti-Trump. Well, Krauthammer was not in that category. He was not pro-Trump. He was in the middle. And we're banned. We have videos on how you can forgive people, given by a UCLA psychiatrist. How best to forgive people. How to Raise Good Children from a family psychologist. And we're banned. Do you understand how evil the left is? You don't. And the truth is, a lot of people don't. For one thing, they've taken over the word liberal, and liberals are not evil. Liberals are cowards because they fight the wrong side. They're afraid to fight the left. I don't blame them. As the astronaut who tweeted a quote from Winston Churchill and called him a great man learned, you have much more to fear from the left than you do from God. So there's much more fear of left in this society than fear of God. Within 6 hours, he said he called Churchill a racist. 6 hours after tweeting he was a great man, he had an education in 6 hours. People forget all these things because every day there's a new event. And how long will Covington Catholic High School even be? Remember, people say, what happened at Covington with Covington Catholic High School kids? Talking about Covington High School, I'm going to just bring to you an example here. Huh? Covington? Not Covington? Covington? Okay. I read more than I listen and watch. So, Huffington Post had a piece a few days ago by a man named David Perry. He says he works at the University of Minnesota. I always find that odd. What does it mean he works at the university? Is he in the janitorial division? What does it mean? But anyway, it says a historian and journalist. Fine. So the article dumps on Mrs. Pence for going to teach at a Christian school, which demands certain things from parents, and in the sexual realm. I'll talk about that in a moment. But listen to this. As this essay went to press, a video of young white men from Covington Catholic High School harassing a group of indigenous people went viral. The students had traveled from Kentucky to D.C. to attend the March for Life, but paused to surround Elder Nathan Phillips as he was playing a drum and chanting. One slid close, grinning, thrilled with his racist provocation. A Hazel Massery of his generation. What's Hazel Massery? Okay. He was thrilled with his racist provocation. So these are the lies. So I looked up. Some people at least had the decency to apologize. This guy didn't. This is in the Huffington Post. I checked. Did he write anything afterwards? Nothing about this. If I'm wrong, I will apologize. But this is typical of the left. He smears people as racist. It turns out he's the liar. He told a fraud. He perpetrated a libel and never says another word afterwards. This is the stuff. Huffington Post publishes this stuff regularly. Is he ever called out? Of course not. Will the University of Minnesota say, you lied about these kids in a public forum? Of course not. What if somebody at the University of Minnesota said a bunch of black kids were racist? What would happen? Bye-bye, baby. This is what goes on, my friends. This is daily. It's an inundation of lies and smears. That's what it is. What is this now? What are you showing me here? Oh, Hazel Massery. Here we go. Hazel Bryan Massery, born 1934, was a student at Little Rock Central High School during the Civil Rights Movement. She was depicted in an iconic photograph that showed her shouting at Elizabeth Eckford, one of the Little Rock Nine, during the school integration crisis. Interesting. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, so it's a woman who was screaming at a black who was walking into class at Little Rock Central High School. So he is compared to that. Get it? This boy, based on a few minutes of a video that this guy David Perry saw. Emmanuel Christian is not unusual. This is the contempt for Emmanuel Christian School, where Mrs. Pence is going back to teaching. The school requires moral purity from its staff. By the way, they require moral purity on the left. It's just a different moral purity. The guy doesn't see that everything he describes about Emmanuel Christian is true about the whole left. What is this attack on cheerleaders, right? It's moral purity from their perspective. Yes. Let's see. Meaning they can't be queer, have sex outside marriage, or watch porn, and must respect the unique roles of men and women, quote unquote. Okay, that's so, you see, let me explain to David Perry, who's not particularly bright. Let me explain to this gentleman the difference. I don't happen to agree with everything that Emmanuel Christian demands. Fine? Okay, so what? This is the difference. Emmanuel Christian claims to be Christian and have certain standards. But the university claims to be open. Emmanuel Christian is honest. The University of Minnesota, where he works, lies. That's the difference. If university said, we are left-wing institutions and we will enforce our left-wing version of morality, I would say nothing. But they perpetrate the fraud that the Christian schools do not. The forces of destruction are very, very powerful. The Electoral College, male, female, Boy Scouts, universities, and even cheerleaders. I'm Dennis Prager. Visit the Prager store. They have the best of 2018 on sale.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
I want to talk to you about the Electoral College and why it matters. All right, I know this doesn't sound like the most sensational topic of the day, but stay with me because I promise you it's one of the most important. To explain why requires a very brief civics review. The President and Vice President of the United States are not chosen by a nationwide popular vote of the American people. Rather, they are chosen by 538 electors. This process is spelled out in the United States Constitution. Why didn't the founders just make it easy and let the presidential candidate with the most votes claim victory? Why did they create, and why do we continue to need this electoral college? The answer is critical to understanding not only the electoral college, but also America. The founders had no intention of creating a pure majority rule democracy. They knew from careful study of history what most have forgotten today or never learned. Pure democracies do not work. They implode. Democracy has been colorfully described as two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. In a pure democracy, bare majorities can easily tyrannize the rest of a country. The founders wanted to avoid this at all costs. This is why we have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. It's why each state has 2 senators, no matter what its population, but also different numbers of representatives based entirely on population. It's why it takes a supermajority in Congress and 3/4 of the states to change the Constitution. And it's why we have the Electoral College. Here's how the Electoral College works. The presidential election happens in 2 phases. The first phase is purely democratic. We hold 51 popular elections every presidential election year, 1 in each state and 1 in D.C. On Election Day in 2012, you may have thought you were voting for Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, but you were really voting for a slate of presidential electors. In Rhode Island, for example, if you voted for Barack Obama, you voted for the state's 4 Democratic electors. If you voted for Mitt Romney, you were really voting for the state's 4 Republican electors. Part 2 of the election is held in December, and it is this December election among the state's 538 electors, not the November election, which officially determines the identity of the next president. At least 270 votes are needed to win. Why is this so important? Because the system encourages coalition building and national campaigning. In order to win, a candidate must have the support of many different types of voters from various parts of the country. Winning only the South or the Midwest is not good enough. You cannot win 270 electoral votes if only one part of the country is supporting you. But if winning were only about getting the most votes, a candidate might concentrate all of his efforts in the biggest cities or the biggest states. Why would that candidate care about what people in West Virginia or Iowa or Montana think? But you might ask, isn't the election really only about the so-called swing states? Actually, no. If nothing else, safe and swing states are constantly changing. California voted safely Republican as recently as 1988. Texas used to vote Democrat. Neither New Hampshire nor Virginia used to be swing states. Most people think that George W. Bush won the 2000 election because of Florida. Well, sort of, but he really won the election because he managed to flip one state which the Democrats thought was safe, West Virginia. Its 4 electoral votes turned out to be decisive. No political party can ignore any state for too long without suffering the consequences. Every state, and therefore every voter in every state, is important. The Electoral College also makes it harder to steal elections. Votes must be stolen in the right state in order to change the outcome of the Electoral College. With so many swing states, this is hard to predict and hard to do. But without the Electoral College, any vote stolen in any precinct in the country could affect the national outcome, even if that vote was easily stolen in the bluest California precinct or the reddest Texas one. The Electoral College is an ingenious method of selecting a president for a great, diverse republic such as our own. It protects against the tyranny of the majority, encourages coalition building, and discourages voter fraud. Our founders were proud of it. We can be too. I'm Tara Ross for Prager University.
Join Prager University.
In every presidential election, only one question matters. Which candidate will get the 270 votes needed to win the Electoral College? Our founders so deeply feared a tyranny of the majority that they rejected the idea of a direct vote for president. That's why they created the Electoral College. For more than 2 centuries, it has encouraged coalition building, given a voice to both big and small states, and discouraged voter fraud. Unfortunately, there is now a well-financed, below-the-radar effort to do away with the Electoral College. It is called National Popular Vote, or NPV, and it wants to do exactly what the founders rejected: award the job of president to the person who gets the most votes nationally. Even if you agree with this goal, it's hard to agree with their method. Rather than amend the Constitution, which they have no chance of doing, NPV plans an end run around it. Here's what NPV does. It asks states to sign a contract to give their presidential electors to the winner of the national popular vote instead of the winner of the state's popular vote. What does that mean in practice? It means that if NPV had been in place in 2004, for example, when George W. Bush won the national vote, California's electoral votes would have gone to Bush, even though John Kerry won that state by 1.2 million votes. Can you imagine strongly Democratic California calmly awarding its electors to a Republican? Another problem with NPV's plan is that it robs states of their sovereignty. A key benefit of the Electoral College system is that it decentralizes control over the election. Currently, a presidential election is really 51 separate elections, one in each state and one in D.C. These 51 separate processes exist side by side in harmony. They do not and cannot interfere with each other. California's election code applies only to California and determines that state's electors. So a vote cast in Texas can never change the identity of a California elector. NPV would disrupt this careful balance. It would force all voters into one national election pool. Thus, a vote cast in Texas will always affect the outcome in California. And the existence of a different election code in Texas always has the potential to unfairly affect a voter in California. Why? Because state election codes can differ drastically. States have different rules about early voting, registering to vote, and qualifying for the ballot. They have different policies regarding felon voting. They have different triggers for recounts. Each and every one of these differences is an opportunity for someone, somewhere, to file a lawsuit claiming unfair treatment. Why should a voter in New York get more or less time to early vote than a voter in Florida? Why should a hanging Chad count in Florida but not in Ohio? The list of possible complaints is endless. And think of the opportunities for voter fraud if NPV is passed. Currently, an attempt to steal a presidential election requires phony ballots to appear or real ballots to disappear in the right state or combination of states, something that is very hard to anticipate. But with NPV, voter fraud anywhere can change the election results. No need to figure out which states you must swing, just add or subtract the votes you need, or don't want, wherever you can most easily get away with it. And finally, if NPV is adopted, and winning is only about getting the most votes, a candidate might concentrate all of his efforts in the biggest cities or the biggest states. We could see the end of presidential candidates who care about the needs and concerns of people in smaller states or outside of big cities. Here's why all of this is of so much concern. NPV is more than halfway to its goal. NPV's contract will go into effect when states with a combined 270 electoral votes have signed. To date, NPV already has the support of 10 states plus D.C. Together, that's 165 electoral votes, leaving only 105 votes to go. It is time to stop this attempt to undo the way American presidents are elected, which will in turn undo America. The people behind NPV think they are wiser than every generation of Americans that preceded them. They aren't. I'm Tara Ross for Prager University.
Join Prager University.
John Stossel. School choice is not just about letting families choose a school, it's also about ideas. It's School Choice Week. School choice is a noble cause. In much of America, parents have little or no control over where their kids attend school. Local governments assign schools by zip code. Having choice is better. Whether it's vouchers, scholarships, charters, private schools, or just having options among public schools, choice makes some schools better because educators have to compete for parents' trust. Competition makes most everything better. John Stossel. Government shutdown lessons. We could take a chainsaw to so much of government, so we need competition among ideas, too. There isn't a lot of that in America's schools. In many places, every kid is taught 1. America is largely cruel and unfair, especially to minorities. 2. Political leaders must manage most of life. 3. Under capitalism, rich people prosper by exploiting the poor. To give students another perspective, I started a charity that offers teachers free study guides, sample lessons and videos that introduce students to free market ideas. Stossel in the classroom. Most of the videos are versions of my reporting for Stossel TV, Fox and ABC News, specially edited for students. In these videos, kids hear from people in parts of the world where markets are not as free and people suffer because of it. After watching, one high school student told us that he now understood that America is the rare place where you can write the script of your own life. That idea is important to kids, who don't always feel that they're in control of their lives. One student, Gabriel Miller, told us, "When I originally went to school, it was all taught from one side, this country is horrible, because you are a minority you can't make it. It made me dislike the country. But after the videos were shown, I felt ashamed for what I initially believed." He then enlisted in the National Guard. "I wanted to give back for, not only giving my family so much opportunity, but also to protect, defend and serve the people in the United States. We never really thought like this before," his classmate Diane Perez told us. "We're taught that the government is responsible for us, and we have to trust them in doing everything for us." After watching videos about entrepreneurs, Perez decided he didn't want government to take charge of his life. Instead, he started his own business. His company delivers cars to customers without them having to step foot in a dealership. Students say certain ideas in the videos stand out because they are different from the anti-market messages they usually hear in school. One that stuck with many was unintended consequences. The idea that laws meant to protect people often end up harming them instead. A higher minimum wage, for example. Most Americans support that idea, and it does raise some workers' pay. But a minimum also prices young and marginal workers out of jobs by making it illegal for them to get starter experience at lower pay. Every law, every regulation is announced with the loftiest of intentions, making the poor richer, protecting the environment, guaranteeing food safety, but again and again, the laws not only fail to achieve their stated objectives but also make things worse by limiting choices, and making it harder for businesses and customers to find mutually satisfying solutions. Few students understand that. In fact, these days most are more pro-government, even socialist, than their millennial, Generation X and Boomer predecessors. Watching these videos in class will help many students open their minds. One student told us the video series contradicts all these beliefs about how socialism is great. I would hope so. Socialism is definitely not great. Fortunately, about 10 million students will watch these videos in class this year. Some will change their minds. I went to my mom. I was like, "Do you know who's really paying for all this government stuff?" said Diane. Click here to get the Fox News app. If you know teachers who might want to use the videos in their classrooms, please tell them about sitc.org. All our resources are free. School Choice Week isn't just about letting kids and parents choose where they go to school. It also means being able to choose what ideas they learn, including the concept of choice itself.